When Amara debugs a billionaire CEO's code at 3 a.m., she breaks the first rule of survival: stay invisible. Now the housekeeper who is sold into servitude and the heir who never questioned his privilege are falling for each other across an impossible divide, and the head housekeeper who catches them together holds the power to destroy them both. With one phone call, Amara could lose everything: her freedom, her family's safety, and the only person who's ever made her feel human again. The auctioneer's voice echoed through Amara's mind as she scrubbed the marble floor on her hands and knees. Going once, going twice, sold. But there had been no actual auction. Just her father's trembling hands signing papers he couldn't read, trading 5 years of her life for 40,000 shillings. Enough to cover his gambling debts. Not enough to cover her shame. You missed a spot. Mrs. Song's sharp voice cut through her thoughts like a knife. The head housekeeper stood over her, arms crossed, lips pursed in perpetual disapproval. And you're too slow. In Korea, we work efficiently. Maybe in Africa, you people have all day, but here we have standards. Amara bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted blood. 6 months. She'd survived 6 months of this. Only 4.5 years to go. She dipped her brush back into the bucket, the chemical smell of bleach burning her nostrils. Yes, Mrs. Song. I apologize. Apology doesn't clean floors. The older woman's heels clicked away across the pristine kitchen tiles, each step a small victory in her daily campaign to remind Amara of her place. It was 3 a.m. Amara had been working since 5 the previous morning. 22 hours. Her back screamed with every movement. Her knees were raw despite the thin padding of her uniform, and her eyes burned from exhaustion and unshed tears. But she couldn't stop. Not yet. The Kung family mansion was 17,000 square feet of minimalist luxury. Every surface gleamed. Every corner pristine. And Amara was responsible for keeping it that way, along with cooking, laundry, and whatever else Mrs. Song demanded. The employment agency's contract was clear. Failure to perform duties satisfactorily would result in penalty fees added to her debt. She'd already learned that satisfactory was whatever Mrs. Song decided it meant on any given day. Amara finished the floor and hauled herself up, her legs shaking. She needed to check the laundry, prep vegetables for breakfast, and then maybe, just maybe, she'd have an hour to sleep before the household woke at 7. She dumped the dirty water in the utility sink and was heading toward the basement stairs when she heard it. Music. No, not music. Voices. Speaking English. Coming from the library. Amara froze. The family was supposed to be asleep. Mr. and Mrs. King were in Japan on business. Their son, the famous CEO she'd never met, lived in his own penthouse downtown. Only the grandmother stayed in the mansion, and she never left her wing after 9 p.m. Mrs. Song had her own cottage on the property. The house should be silent. Had someone broken in? Her heart hammered as she crept toward the library door, which stood slightly ajar. Warm light spilled into the darkened hallway. She should call security. She should run. Instead, she peeked through the gap. A man sat at the massive oak desk, his back to her, shoulders hunched over a laptop. The voices were coming from his computer, some kind of video lecture. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s, wearing an expensive-looking white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Dark hair fell across his forehead as he leaned forward, completely absorbed. Not a burglar. But who? As if sensing her presence, the man spun around in his chair. Amara's breath caught. She'd seen his face before, in the society magazines Mrs. Song left lying around. Kang Ji-hun. The son. The billionaire CEO of Kongtech. Forbes' most eligible bachelor in Asia 3 years running. And she was staring at him like a creeper at 3 a.m. Who are you? His voice was surprisingly soft, curious rather than angry. His eyes, dark and intense, scanned her face with an intelligence that made her feel completely exposed. I'm sorry, sir. I work here. I thought. I heard noise and thought maybe. She bowed deeply, the way Mrs. Song had taught her. Never make eye contact with the family. Never speak unless spoken to. Never forget your place. You work here. He glanced at his watch. At 3 a.m.? Yes, sir. I'm the housekeeper. I was just finishing the kitchen floor. The kitchen floor. He repeated it as if testing the words. And that takes until 3 in the morning? Amara kept her eyes fixed on the carpet. It was cream-colored, probably cost more than her family's entire house. I have other duties as well, sir. I apologize for disturbing you. I'll go now. Wait. The command was gentle but firm. What's your name? Amara, sir. Amara. He said it carefully, with the slight hesitation of someone encountering an unfamiliar word. That's a beautiful name. What does it mean? No one had asked her that in 6 months. No one had asked her anything personal in 6 months. She was the help, or the African girl, or simply ignored. It means grace. In Swahili. Grace. A small smile touched his lips. And what are you doing in Korea, Amara? The question was innocent. He had no idea it was a blade twisting in her gut. What was she doing in Korea? Being sold. Being worked like an animal. Surviving. Barely. I work for your family, sir. Through the employment agency. Something flickered in his expression, too quick for her to read. I see. And do you always work 20-hour days? The work must be done, sir. That's not what I asked. Amara finally looked up, meeting his eyes despite Mrs. Song's rules. There was something in his gaze that caught her off guard. Not pity. Not the cold superiority she'd expected. Something else. Interest? Concern? She couldn't tell. Yes, she said quietly. I work every day. All day. That can't be legal. A bitter laugh escaped before she could stop it. I apologize, sir. I should go. No. He stood, and she realized how tall he was. Easily 6 feet. He moved around the desk toward her, and she instinctively stepped back. He stopped immediately, hands raised slightly. I'm not going to hurt you. What's on the laptop screen behind me? Confused, Amara glanced past him. The video lecture was paused, frozen on a screen full of code. Python, if she wasn't mistaken. Her heart rate quickened for a different reason now. It's a programming tutorial, sir. Python. You know Python? A little. I taught myself some basics. Before. Before what? Before her world fell apart. Before her father gambled away their future. Before she became property. Before I came to Korea, sir. Jihun studied her with those unsettling, intelligent eyes. Then he did something completely unexpected. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. Can you read that code? Tell me what it does. This had to be a test. Or a trap. But Amara found herself moving closer, drawn by the pull of something she'd thought she'd lost forever, her dreams. She studied the screen, her tired mind suddenly alert, parsing through the functions and loops. It's a sorting algorithm, she said slowly. Quicksort implementation. But there's an error in the partition function. Line 23. The pivot selection will cause problems with already sorted arrays. The silence stretched so long she thought she'd made a terrible mistake. Then Jihun laughed, a genuine sound of delight. You're absolutely right. I've been staring at this for an hour trying to figure out why my test cases were failing. He gestured to the chair he'd been sitting in. Please. Show me. Sir, I couldn't. I'm just the housekeeper. I should. You're someone who just debugged my code in 30 seconds. Please. Sit. Amara hesitated, every instinct screaming that this was wrong, that Mrs. Song would appear any second and add another penalty to her debt. But the laptop screen glowed like a beacon, and it had been so long, so desperately long since she'd felt like anything more than a pair of hands scrubbing floors. She sat. Her fingers trembled as they hovered over the keyboard. 6 months without touching a computer. 6 months of bleach and mops and Mrs. Song's contempt. Now here she was, sitting in a leather chair that probably cost more than the debt that owned her, about to touch code again. "Go ahead," Ji-hun said softly, leaning against the desk beside her. "I want to see how you'd fix it." Amara's hands found the keys like coming home. She scrolled through the code, her exhaustion forgotten as the familiar logic patterns clicked into place in her mind. "The problem is here," she explained, her voice gaining confidence. "When you choose the last element as the pivot, it creates worst-case time complexity for sorted data. If we modify the partition to use a random pivot, or better yet, median of 3. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, adjusting the code, adding comments to explain her changes. She was vaguely aware of Ji-hun moving closer, watching over her shoulder, but she was lost in it now. This was who she used to be. Who she was supposed to be. Not a servant. Not a slave. A programmer. A thinker. Someone who mattered. "There," she said finally, sitting back. "Try it now." Ji-hun reached past her and ran the test cases. Green checks appeared down the screen. Every single test passed. He let out a low whistle. "That's impressive. Where did you learn to code?" "YouTube mostly. And some online courses. I was saving money for university back home." Computer science. The past tense tasted like ash in her mouth. "I wanted to build apps for African markets. Solutions for people like my family. Banking access, agricultural data, education platforms." She stopped herself. Why was she telling him this? He didn't care about her broken dreams. But when she glanced up, his expression was intense, focused. "Why did you stop?" The question hung in the air between them. "Why did you stop?" "Because my father lost everything gambling on football matches he couldn't afford to bet on. Because the loan sharks came and my mother cried and my little sister asked why the men were so angry. Because the employment agency woman with her fake smile and false promises said I could earn enough in Korea to save my family and still go to university afterward. Because I was stupid enough to believe her." "Family circumstances," Amara said carefully. "I needed to work instead. As a housekeeper." His tone wasn't judgmental, just puzzled. "When you can do this." "Not everyone has choices, sir." Something shifted in his expression. He pulled over another chair and sat down, angling it so they were face to face. This close, she could see the fatigue in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "No," he said quietly. "I suppose they don't. I'm sorry. That was insensitive." An apology. From a billionaire CEO to his family's housekeeper. Amara didn't know what to do with that. "You don't need to apologize, sir. I should get back to work." "The laundry." "It's 3:30 in the morning. The laundry can wait." He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that made him look younger, more human. "I'm sorry. I'm being presumptuous. You're probably exhausted. I never meet anyone who actually understands this stuff. Everyone in my meetings just nods and says yes and pretends to follow along. But you actually see it. The logic. The elegance. Why are you here?" The question escaped before Amara could stop it. "I mean in the house. Mrs. Song said you live downtown." "I do. Usually. But sometimes the penthouse feels." He paused, searching for words. "Empty. Too quiet. I know that sounds ridiculous coming from someone who has everything, but..." "Lonely," Amara finished softly. "It sounds lonely." Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Two people awake at 3:30 in the morning, both running from something they couldn't name. "Yes," Ji-hun said. "Lonely. My parents think I should marry. Produce an heir. Secure the family legacy. They've introduced me to every suitable woman in Seoul. Daughters of other CEOs, chaebols, politicians. Perfect on paper. But when I talk to them, it's like..." He gestured helplessly. "Like talking to polished mirrors. They reflect back what they think I want to see. Nothing real. Nothing true." Amara knew she should stay silent. This was too intimate, too personal. She was the help. But exhaustion and 6 months of silence had worn down her filters. Maybe they're scared, she said. When you have that much power, that much money, maybe people forget how to be real around you. They're too busy trying to be what you need. Jihoon stared at her. God, that's exactly it. How did you? Because I do the same thing, Amara admitted. Every day. I'm not real around your family. Around Mrs. Song. I'm what they need me to be. Invisible. Obedient. Efficient. The real me. She swallowed hard. The real me died the day I signed that contract. What contract? The question was casual, but Amara felt ice flood her veins. She'd said too much. Way too much. Nothing, sir. I'm sorry. I'm very tired. I'm saying things I shouldn't. Amara. Please, sir. I really should go. If Mrs. Song finds me here, sitting down, talking to you. She stood abruptly, nearly knocking over the chair. Thank you for letting me see the code. It was nice to remember who I used to be. Even for a moment. She was halfway to the door when his voice stopped her. Come back tomorrow night. Amara turned slowly. Sir, tomorrow night. Same time. I'll be working on a new project. Machine learning algorithms for our robotics division. I could use a fresh perspective. Someone who actually understands code instead of just quarterly profit projections. He stood, and there was something almost vulnerable in his expression. Please, if you're not too tired. I know I'm asking a lot, and you don't owe me anything, but it was nice. Talking to someone real. Every logical part of Amara's brain screamed no. This was dangerous. This crossed every line. Mrs. Song would destroy her. The agency would add penalties. She'd be trapped here even longer. But God, to touch code again. To think. To be something more than hands that scrubbed and cleaned and served. I'll try, she heard herself say. If I can finish my work. Jihoon's smile was brighter than the laptop screen. Thank you. And Amara? Take this. He pulled a business card from his wallet and scribbled something on the back. My private number. If anyone gives you trouble about taking a break, you tell them to call me. Directly. She took the card with shaking fingers. Heavy stock, embossed letters. Kang Ji-hun, CEO, Kongtech Industries. And on the back, in surprisingly messy handwriting, a phone number. I can't. You can. You should be able to sleep, to rest. No one should work 22 hours straight. That's not employment. That's... He stopped, jaw tightening. Just take it. Please. Amara clutched the card like a lifeline. Thank you, sir. Jihoon. When it's just us, call me Jihoon. The intimacy of it terrified her. I can't do that. Why not? Because you're a billionaire and I'm owned by an employment agency. Because this is temporary and tomorrow I'll go back to being invisible. Because if I let myself believe this is real, it will destroy me when it ends. Because it's not appropriate, sir. Jihoon looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. Okay. For now. But Amara? What you did tonight, fixing that code in minutes. That's not nothing. You're not nothing. I hope you know that. She fled before the tears could fall. Amara made it to the basement laundry room before her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the cold concrete floor, the business card still clutched in her hand, and let the sobs come. Silent, shaking sobs that racked her entire body. She couldn't afford to make noise. Couldn't afford to be caught breaking down. But 6 months of holding everything inside had finally cracked open. He'd called her impressive. He'd asked her to come back. He'd given her his private number. And in 2 hours, Mrs. Song would wake up and the dream would be over. Amara forced herself up, splashed cold water on her face from the utility sink, and got back to work. The laundry wouldn't fold itself. The vegetables wouldn't prep themselves. And if she didn't finish everything before dawn, there would be penalties. There were always penalties. She worked on autopilot, her mind replaying every moment in the library. The way Ji-hun had looked at her code with genuine respect. The way he'd listened when she spoke, like her words actually mattered. The loneliness in his voice when he talked about his empty penthouse. "Stop it," she whispered to herself as she chopped carrots with mechanical precision. "Stop hoping. Hope is dangerous." But hope was already spreading through her chest like warmth, terrifying and irresistible. By the time Mrs. Song appeared at 6:30, Amara had finished prep work for breakfast, folded 3 loads of laundry, and scrubbed the downstairs bathrooms. She stood at attention in the kitchen, eyes down, waiting for inspection. Mrs. Song circled her slowly, examining every surface with the intensity of a general inspecting troops. "The bathroom mirrors have streaks," she said finally. "You'll redo them after breakfast service. And you're moving too slowly. Perhaps we need to add an extra hour to your shift to compensate for inefficiency." An extra hour meant even less sleep. Meant 23-hour days instead of 22. Amara felt the business card burning in her pocket. She could call him. She could tell Ji-hun what was happening. But then what? He'd intervene, Mrs. Song would know they'd spoken, and Amara would face consequences she couldn't imagine. "Yes, Mrs. Song," she said instead. "I apologize for my inefficiency. Apology doesn't clean mirrors." The same line as always. Mrs. Song's greatest hit. "Now start the breakfast. The grandmother wants her meal at 7 sharp." Amara moved through the familiar routine. Prepare the rice. Steam the vegetables. Arrange everything on the expensive china with the crane pattern. Deliver it to the grandmother's wing. Bow. Retreat. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact. Don't exist. The grandmother, a tiny woman with steel gray hair and eyes like ice chips, barely glanced at her. To her, Amara was furniture. Useful furniture that needed feeding and occasional maintenance, but furniture nonetheless. The day crawled by in a blur of exhaustion. Amara cleaned 17 bathrooms, washed windows, polished silver, scrubbed floors she'd scrubbed the night before. Her body moved, but her mind kept drifting back to the library, to code, to the way Ji-hun had smiled when she fixed his algorithm. At 10 p.m., Mrs. Song finally dismissed her. "Be ready at 5 a.m. tomorrow. The master and mistress return from Japan and expect the house perfect." Amara bowed and retreated to her room. Calling it a room was generous. It was a converted storage space in the basement, barely big enough for a narrow cot and a tiny dresser. No window. No decoration. Just gray walls and a single bare bulb overhead. She collapsed onto the cot without undressing, every muscle screaming. She needed sleep. Desperately needed sleep. Instead, she stared at the ceiling and thought about the library. Would Ji-hun really be there? Or had it been a momentary whim, forgotten by morning? Rich people were like that, her mother had always warned. They played with poor people's hopes like toys, then tossed them aside when bored. But something in his eyes had seemed genuine. The loneliness. The hunger for real conversation. Or maybe Amara was just so desperate for kindness that she was imagining things. At 2:30 a.m., she gave up on sleep. She hauled herself off the cot, changed into a clean uniform, and crept upstairs. Her heart hammered with each step. This was stupid. Reckless. If Mrs. Song caught her going to the library instead of working, the consequences would be severe. But her feet carried her forward anyway. The library door stood ajar again, light spilling into the hallway. And there he was. Ji-hun, in a different expensive shirt, same rolled-up sleeves, hunched over the laptop with the same intense focus. Amara knocked softly on the doorframe. He spun around, and his face lit up with such genuine pleasure that something in her chest tightened painfully. "You came. I wasn't sure you would." "I shouldn't be here," Amara said, but she was already moving into the room, drawn like a moth to flame. "If Mrs. Song finds out..." "Mrs. Song works for my family. I work for my family. I outrank her." Ji-hun gestured to the chair beside him. Please. I've been stuck on this problem for hours and I'm going cross-eyed. Amara sat, and he angled the laptop toward her. The screen showed complex neural network architecture, layers upon layers of nodes and connections. We're trying to teach our robots to recognize emotional cues in human faces, he explained. But the accuracy rate is terrible. 62%. Barely better than chance. She studied the code, her tired brain struggling to focus. Then she saw it. Your training data is biased. Look, you're using mostly Western faces for the baseline. But facial expressions vary across cultures. A smile doesn't always mean happiness in every society. And you're not accounting for micro-expressions at all. Ji-hun leaned closer, reading over her shoulder. He smelled like expensive cologne and coffee. You're right. God, you're absolutely right. We've been so focused on the algorithm we didn't question the dataset. He grabbed a notebook and started scribbling furiously. If we expand the training data to include more diverse faces, more cultural contexts, more subtle expressions. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, Amara pointing out issues, Ji-hun implementing fixes. It felt surreal. Yesterday she'd been nothing but a maid. Tonight she was debugging AI systems with a billionaire CEO. Can I ask you something? Ji-hun said suddenly. Amara tensed. Of course, sir. Why do you always call me sir? Even after I asked you not to. Because dropping the formality makes this feel real, and real things can hurt you. It's appropriate, sir. You're my employer's son. I'm also a person. Talking to another person. About code we both love. He set down his pen and turned to face her fully. Amara, I meant what I said yesterday. When it's just us, I want you to feel like you can be yourself. The real you. The programmer. The thinker. Not just the help. But I am the help, Amara said quietly. That's not going to change because we talk about algorithms in the middle of the night. Why not? The question was so naive it almost made her laugh. Why not? Because life doesn't work that way. Because Cinderella is a fairy tale and this is reality. Because I'm owned by an employment agency and you're heir to a fortune and those two worlds don't intersect. Because reality doesn't care what we want, she said instead. Ji-hun was quiet for a long moment. Then, tell me about your family. Back home. The change of subject caught her off guard. Why? Because I want to know. Because you're interesting and I barely meet interesting people anymore. Because. He hesitated. Because I like talking to you. Amara's throat tightened. When was the last time someone said they liked talking to her? There's not much to tell. My mother sells vegetables in the market. I have a younger sister, Grace. She's 12. Smart as anything. She wants to be a doctor. And your father? The question landed like a punch. Amara looked away. My father made some bad choices. That's why I'm here. The contract you mentioned. It wasn't a question. I shouldn't have said that. Please forget I did. Amara, if something's wrong. Nothing's wrong. The lie tasted bitter. I chose to come here. To work. To send money home. It was my choice. Even as she said it, she could feel Ji-hun's eyes on her, could sense him not believing her. But he didn't push. Instead, he said, tell me about Grace. What kind of medicine does she want to practice? And just like that, the tension broke. Amara found herself talking about her sister, about Grace's dreams of running a clinic in their village, about how she'd practice giving injections on oranges and bandage her dolls. Ji-hun listened with complete attention, asking questions, laughing at the funny stories. For an hour, Amara forgot about Mrs. Song and the contract and the crushing weight of her situation. For an hour, she was just a girl talking to a boy who seemed to genuinely care what she had to say. Then Ji-hun's phone alarm went off. 4:30 a.m. You need to go, he said reluctantly. Before the house wakes up. Amara stood, reality crashing back. Yes. I'm sorry for taking so much of your time. Stop apologizing. Jihoon stood too, and suddenly they were very close in the quiet library. Amara, can I ask one more thing? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Tomorrow night. Same time. Will you come back? She should say no. Should end this before it became something she couldn't walk away from. But the hope in his eyes matched the hope blooming dangerously in her chest. I'll try, she whispered. That's all I ask. He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Thank you. For tonight. For seeing me as just me. Amara fled before she could do something stupid. Like tell him she was starting to see him as much more than just a lonely CEO. Like tell him she was starting to care. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange double life. By day, Amara was invisible, scrubbing and cleaning and enduring Mrs. Song's endless criticism. By night, she came alive in the library with Jihoon, debugging code and talking about everything and nothing. They never ran out of things to discuss. Technology, philosophy, childhood memories, dreams deferred. Jihoon told her about building his first computer at age 12, about the pressure of inheriting his father's empire, about the loneliness of always being watched and judged. Amara told him about teaching herself to code on a shared computer at the village library, about her sister's laugh, about the smell of rain on red earth. What she didn't tell him was the truth about her contract, about the debt that owned her. About the penalties that accumulated every time Mrs. Song decided she'd been inefficient. The number kept growing. 40,000 shillings had become 55,000 with fees and living expenses and mysterious charges she didn't understand. She didn't tell him because she was terrified. Terrified he'd pity her. Terrified he'd try to help and make everything worse. Terrified that if he knew how broken she really was, he'd stop looking at her the way he did, like she was someone who mattered. On the 15th night, everything changed. Amara arrived at the library to find Jihoon agitated, pacing in front of the windows. You're upset, she said, closing the door behind her. What happened? Board meeting today. They want to cut our AI ethics division. Say it's not profitable enough. He turned to her, frustration radiating off him. We're building robots that will interact with humans every day, make decisions that affect people's lives, but apparently ensuring they do it ethically isn't worth the investment. What did you say? I fought them. Said absolutely not. That our responsibility doesn't end at the bottom line. He laughed bitterly. My father pulled me aside afterward. Reminded me that I'm CEO in title only. That I'm still young, still learning. That I should listen to the experienced board members who know better. Amara moved closer, drawn by the pain in his voice. But you don't agree. Of course I don't agree. Technology without ethics is dangerous. But everyone just wants profits and market share and quarterly growth. He slumped into his chair, suddenly looking exhausted. Sometimes I wonder if I'm making any difference at all. Or if I'm just a figurehead, a famous face for the company while other people make all the real decisions. You're not a figurehead. The words came out fierce, surprising them both. You care about doing things right. That matters. Even if they can't see it. Jihoon looked up at her, something vulnerable and raw in his expression. You always know what to say. How do you do that? Because I know what it's like to feel powerless, Amara said softly. To feel like nothing you do makes a difference. You're not powerless. You're brilliant. You could do anything you wanted. The innocent statement cracked something open inside her. All the secrets, all the shame, came pouring out. No, I can't. I can't do anything. I'm trapped here, Jihoon. I didn't choose to come to Korea. I was sold. Silence crashed down between them. What? His voice was barely a whisper. And then she was telling him everything. The employment agency. Her father's debts. The contract that bound her for 5 years. The wages garnished for mysterious fees. Mrs. Song's punishments and penalties. The tiny basement room. The 23-hour days. The impossibility of it all. I'm not an employee, she finished, tears streaming down her face. I'm property. Bought and paid for. And every time I think maybe I can survive this, they add another fee, another penalty, and the debt grows instead of shrinking. I'll never be free. Never. Jihoon had gone perfectly still, his face pale. My family did this to you. Not you. The agency. Your grandmother hired them. But it's not your fault. It's happening in my house. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping back. Under my family's roof. Using my family's money. Jesus, Amara, why didn't you tell me? Because what could you do? You're the CEO's son, but you just said yourself you don't have real power. And if you tried to help, they'd make it worse for me. They'd send me somewhere else, somewhere you couldn't find me. Or worse. Worse? What's worse than this? His voice cracked. You're working yourself to death in my family's house, and I had no idea. I've been keeping you awake for hours every night, taking the only time you had to rest while you... No. Amara grabbed his arm, desperate for him to understand. These nights with you have been the only thing keeping me alive. The only time I feel like a human being instead of a machine. Please don't take that away from me too. Jihoon stared at her hand on his arm. Then, slowly, carefully, he covered it with his own. I won't. I promise. But Amara, this has to stop. The exploitation. The abuse. I have to do something. You can't. Please. If they know I told you, if they think I'm causing trouble, then what? You just accept this? You just survive until the 5 years are up, if you survive at all. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. But even as he said it, his face crumpled. God, I sound just like them. The entitled rich kid who thinks willpower solves everything. I'm sorry. You're right. You're right, and I'm an idiot. They stood there, hands still touching, the weight of reality crushing down on them both. I need to see the contract, Jihoon said finally. Let me see exactly what we're dealing with. I don't have a copy. The agency kept it. Then I'll get one. Tomorrow. I'll tell my family I need to review all household employment contracts for, I don't know, liability reasons. Something corporate. They won't question it. His grip on her hand tightened. I can't promise I can fix this. But I can promise I'll try. Is that enough? Amara looked into his eyes and saw determination, fury, and something else. Something that made her heart race and her breath catch. Something dangerous and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. Why? She whispered. Why do you care so much? Jihoon was quiet for a long moment. Then, because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be real. To care about something more than stock prices and board meetings. You make me want to be better. Braver. He lifted his other hand, hesitating, then gently wiped a tear from her cheek. And, because the thought of you suffering while I did nothing makes me feel sick. Jihoon, I'm falling for you. The words tumbled out, raw and honest. I know I shouldn't. I know this is complicated and messy and probably the worst timing in the world. But I can't help it. Every night I wait for you to walk through that door. Every day I think about what you said, what you taught me. You've become the best part of my day. The realest part. Amara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. I'm a housekeeper. You're a billionaire CEO. This is impossible. I don't care about possible. I care about you. Your family would never allow it. The agency would never allow it. Mrs. Song. I don't care about Mrs. Song. His voice rose, then dropped to an intense whisper. I care about you, Amara. About your dreams. About your brilliant mind and your kind heart and the way you see the world. I care that you're trapped and suffering and I have the power to help, but you're too scared to let me. I'm not scared. But her voice shook with the lie. Yes, you are. And I understand why. But Amara, please. Let me try. Let me at least try to help you. She wanted to say yes. Wanted to throw herself into his arms and believe that love could conquer debt and contracts and the crushing weight of reality. But she'd learned too well that hope was dangerous. If you do this, she said slowly, if you try to help and it fails, they'll separate us. They'll make sure we never see each other again. And I don't think I could bear that. These nights with you, they're all I have. Then I won't fail. The certainty in his voice was almost convincing. Tomorrow, I get the contract. We see exactly what we're dealing with. And then we make a plan. Together. Okay. Amara knew she should refuse. Knew this was the moment to walk away before she got hurt even worse. But Jihun was looking at her like she was something precious, something worth fighting for, and God help her, she wanted to believe him. Okay, she whispered. Together. He smiled, and despite everything, the fear, the uncertainty, the impossible situation, Amara felt hope bloom warm and dangerous in her chest. Jihun pulled her into a hug, and she let herself lean into his warmth, let herself pretend just for a moment that she was safe, that she was free, that she was loved. I'm going to fix this, he murmured into her hair. I promise you, Amara. I'm going to get you out. She closed her eyes and held on tight, praying he was right. Because if he wasn't, if this hope shattered like all the others, she didn't think she'd survive it. The library door burst open. Mrs. Song stood in the doorway, her face twisted with rage and triumph. I knew it, she hissed. I knew you were sneaking around with the young master, seducing him like the desperate. Get out. Jihun's voice was ice. I'm calling the agency right now. This is grounds for immediate termination and full debt collection. They'll send her back to Africa, throw her family in prison for the unpaid balance. I said get out. Jihun stepped forward, placing himself between Mrs. Song and Amara. You work for this family. I am this family. And I'm telling you to leave. Now. Mrs. Song's eyes narrowed. We'll see what your grandmother has to say about this. She pulled out her phone. We'll see who has the real power in this house. And Amara knew, with sickening certainty, that everything was about to fall apart.